Mothyna, James Brightful, and I have the pleasure of being the Director of Community Engagement here at Turnaround. I have been with Turnaround 16 years. Goodness. And I was running a nonprofit organization called Heal 'em to Heal Nation, and I was working at the Afro-American newspaper. And I was sitting at my desk getting ready to do work and trying to find a women's organization to support and share information with. And what I realized was I opened up this newsletter from this organization called Turnaround, and I'm skimming it, and it said, we work with survivors. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is the perfect organization. And then I happened to look on the back section that said they were hiring. And then somebody needed to be comfortable speaking with youth and had information about DV and SA. I had to Google that at the time. But I said, I can do that. And that began my journey 16 years later with Turnaround. And it combined my desire, my passion to be in spaces that served women, that served girls. And then it amplified the opportunity to also work with anyone who'd experienced a victimization or a risk or a trauma and create the spaces where their voices could be heard, could be honored, and was always going to maintain the authenticity of being their voice and not having to push a message or a method on them, but for them to guide the process so that they could do what they chose to do. So yeah, that's how I ended up in this space. So I actually started off in print journalism. All right, I was supposed to actually go to New York City and work for Essence Magazine, and that didn't happen. Instead, I ended up in Baltimore, Maryland at Morgan State University. So my one dream was, I am a writer and I'm going to write. And so I started working for the school newspaper. At the same time, my commitment to community connected me to the community service department at Morgan. And that's where my journey began to take a turn, because at 19 years old, I will never forget being in a lecture hall surrounded about 80 middle schoolers. And at this point, we separated the boys and the girls. And so the girls were all together. It's about 30 or 40 of them. And I had a coordinator who was using scare tactics. I'm so way better now at doing this type of stuff than I was at 19, go figure. And she had a book of STDs and was walking around and flashing the book at the girls. This is what happens when you have sex. No. Anybody listening, don't do that, okay? Not a really good tactic. What happened though is I had a young girl who was at the top of the lecture hall, and I just saw her shoot up out of her chair and run down the stairs. And at the same time, I'm going, what are you doing? Cut it. I had enough sense to do that at 19. And I was going out the door after her, and her friend followed her out. And she went into the bathroom, and I remember going in the bathroom and like hitting the door. Let me in. Are you okay? What's going on? And her friend looked up at me and said, I don't know what's happening. She just started crying. And when she opened the bathroom door that day, I'm 5'2" and a third. And it doesn't take much to be taller than me. And even though she was only in the 8th grade, she was taller than me. But somehow she still leaned in, right? And still leaned in on my chest, grabbed a hold of me. And that's the first time I'd experienced receiving a disclosure from someone. This 8th grader who was bright, brilliant, just everyone loved her, disclosed that she had found a bump on her vagina and she thought she may have herpes. Therefore, that experience and that exercise triggered her in that moment. And I didn't know what to say. The only thing I had the presence of mind to say is, have you told anyone else? And it turned out that she had actually told her stepmother, and it was that the mom's boyfriend had molested her, and she had already received support and treatment. I don't know what it would have been like if I didn't even have the presence of mind to say that or to ask those questions or to follow up. But my commitment to healing women, my commitment to creating a space for communities, I'll never forget that 8th grader. And for me is, how can I create the space so the next 19-year-old, so the next 90-year-old, if they're confronted with this, they know what to say. They know how to refer, and they know how to take care of themselves after having to kind of navigate that type of experience, because I had no clue what to do and all the things it triggered for me. So that really began my process and my journey to doing work around sexual violence prevention and making that connection. So when you fast forward 5 years and I was introduced to Turnaround, it was like, oh, perfect opportunity to marry my connection and my commitment to creating spaces where women healed. I started Heal 'em to Heal Nation because I 2 years later, became the student queen, right? Miss Morgan State University. And I had to create a community service project. And my community service project was this conference that would blend women from the campus and women from the community to come together for a day of healing. And we had workshops, we did belly dancing, you had a keynote speaker, we ate really good food. And that was this moment and this opportunity to create a space where women could woosah, release the breath, and be fed instead of always having to pour back out. So that's where my journey was, just being crafted along the way, and you could look back and see opportunities. And I'm sure as our listeners and viewers are watching this conversation, you're going to experience opportunities where you're wondering what to do with an experience. And Turnaround may have created an opportunity for you to take a moment or an incentive to then create an opportunity to change someone else's life. I have the amazing job of curating spaces where stories of not only survivorhood, but stories of triumph get to thrive. And the way that I get a chance to do that here is first by creating educational spaces where we can have brave and courageous conversations, where we could talk about how it is that we may be rejuvenating or restoring community, how we can be innovative and apply best practices, even if you are the mentor running the school program and you have no clue and you have no desire even to get into this work, to know how to navigate those conversations. I get the chance to do that by building community capacity. Our volunteer program allows individuals who have a passion or a heart for this to say, well, I want to do something. What can I do? And we navigate a conversation with you and build tools and techniques. So when you're volunteering with us, or if you leave us, when you step into your community, you still carry those same tools and techniques and understand how you can continue to make an impact. So we do that community, that capacity building through the volunteer engagement. And one of the things that happened as a result of COVID, we always knew we needed to get into social media and do more. But then COVID came and we're all at home and we couldn't open our doors physically to allow people in. And the phones were silent, the emails weren't coming in. And it was like, well, what can we do? Well, how about we pivot and use a digital platform that could reach millions across the world to begin to just share our messaging and our content, the things we would go into schools and businesses to talk about. And we began to pivot that conversation online. So again, creating amazing spaces where stories of triumph get a chance to live. So not only did we talk to professionals, not only did we share our own methods, we shared the stories of survivors. And creating that in the digital space, one of the things that we saw happen was survivors reached out in our DMs, right? Some people may talk about DMs for different reasons. For us, it is moments to create a space where somebody can literally step in and say, I can't call you, I can't text you, but nobody's looking at my phone right now and it just looks like I'm on Facebook. So I can send you this message and say, I really need help. How can you help me? And we work together as a team to then say, here's the first step. Now we get you in contact with a crisis worker. That crisis worker gets you into shelter, and then the shelter team gets you into long-term housing, connected with a clinician, creating the space. And all of that happened because social media was where we decided to show up and be present and available and understand how to navigate that back-end conversation to still support survivors without them having to jump through hoops. When we reduce the barriers for people's access to care, it amplifies their ability for healing. It amplifies their ability to then process what may be next for them. So that's why I get a chance to do it Turnaround.
Anxiety has affected me since really the beginning. I was dealing with this all by myself. I was totally isolated. Nobody knew.
Everybody loved Shelby. She was a straight-A student, but a year ago, my sister lost her life to suicide.
I know that my girlfriend struggled really hard with telling people she had this issue. She could hardly tell me. It hurts me because I feel like a lot of my friends have struggled with not being able to admit that they're dealing with these issues.
The last school year, there were 4 teen suicides that happened in Palo Alto. That really sent our entire community into a shock.
Help us mind our future.
Let's tag it.
Tweet it.
Share it.
Instagram it.
Let's snap it.
Me importa el futuro.
I think that social media is a very powerful tool for spreading these issues in a way that's approachable and also really powerful. These personal stories can become almost anthems or just rallying points for other people who feel the same thing.
I did attempt suicide and I tried to end my life, but I bounced back. I'm really thankful that I saw that post because they might not think that they're helping me, but I really appreciated it so much.
Shelby, I guess, never really felt that comfortable coming out and saying to us, I've been really sad. I think, there's something I need to do here.
If you take that step, take that initiative to reach out, tell someone that you're struggling, it can make the biggest difference.
I'm starting the conversation. I'm posting about mental health.
I'm ending the stigma.
We're socializing hope.
I like that.
Me importa el futuro. Together, we can bring change to mind.
I think ending the stigma is the only way to start the conversation and have people feel comfortable enough. They can talk about it. They can seek help.
Show us what you're doing to start the conversation and end the stigma.
What I love about our volunteer process, and we call it our volunteer network, is we see volunteers pretty much as a team member. You are a team member. You happen to be a team member with a super flexible schedule and one that may not be cashing in a regular paycheck. But you are a volunteer that brings in actual funds for the agency, and you're a volunteer that brings your resources and your skill and your time, a currency that none of us can recreate, into this work so we can support survivors. So if someone's interested in volunteering and they can call us, they can send us a message on our website, they can send us a message through Instagram or any of our other social media platforms. Our intent then is to gather their information and we invite them to an orientation. It's an opportunity for them to hear about us, connect with someone on our team, recognize that we're real people and that we're amazing and the same. And then we walk them through and answer any questions they have. Our intent at that point is to help them identify which volunteer role best matches their skill set and their needs. And so at that point, they then begin an onboarding process just like any of our other team members. So we help them understand the scope of the issue. What is domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking? What is trauma-informed care? What is vicarious trauma? What are all these things and how do they relate to me as a volunteer? And we help them understand how it all shows up when they're answering the phone and saying, "Hi, this is Turnaround, how may I serve you?" And you've got someone on the other end who's in crisis or in trauma, that you have the tools to be able to support them in that moment. Or maybe you're walking into a courtroom and you may not say much, but you understand the power of empathy in your presence when that survivor has to stand up and advocate for themselves, whether they have an attorney as support or they're going it alone. We don't want them to feel ever alone. So a court accompaniment volunteer is in the space with them. You don't have to know anything about legal care. All you've got to do is be willing to sit and be present, to hold the metaphorical and maybe physical hand of a survivor who's walking through an experience and help them navigate the journey out of that moment. So our intent with volunteers is to prepare them for any of those roles they're going to step into. We've got volunteers who say, "I love you and I love your work, but I can't commit to becoming an court accompaniment or maybe even sending social media messages. But you know what? I am spent the last 25 years assessing social media marketing tools and strategies. Can I give you a complimentary media or brand audit?" Yes, please. And so maybe they spend the next 30 to 60 days going through doing the audit and then providing our team with training and information on how to apply the information from the audit so that we can better enhance our ability and how we show up in the space. That's a huge benefit and the type of thing that we want to unpack for volunteers, that there's a wide range of things that you can do that make an impact for the survivor ultimately that walks through our doors. So our intent is to ensure that you get a chance to engage in a way that highlights your skills, that highlights your time, and allows us to ultimately get work done that we still need to do. When we talk about being available in communities, we are literally willing to walk the sidewalk and pass out flyers if that's what's needed. But the most impactful thing that makes the difference for us is having deliberate conversations so that folks understand and can build their skills and tools to do this work in whatever capacity makes sense for them. So unfortunately, the most vulnerable communities and populations, and one of them rather, are youth and young children. And one of the things that we end up doing is, let's say, for example, there's a school system, this happened very recently, where maybe a young person was victimized either by another person in that school or by a community liaison. We had an instance where a coach had sexually assaulted multiple students in one particular school district, and they reached out to us. And the question was, what do we do here? So in addition to providing clinical support or counseling, which our team at Turnaround can do, our team also came in and said, hey, here's what we can do. Not only will we train your staff, your teachers and faculty to be able to recognize, refer instances of violence or abuse, we'll also do a parent night, and we'll have a conversation with your parents about how they can carry the conversation forward and be able to have ongoing conversations with their young people, age appropriate, that allows them to have the tools that they need and feel comfortable and confident in sharing that something may have happened to either them or to a friend. And then the third thing we'll do is that we'll go into every single classroom and we'll take the time to have an age appropriate conversation with each of your students so that they feel better equipped, informed, and strong enough to know what to do if something happens to them or to a friend. Our intent here is prevention. We don't want something to happen, and we don't want you to wait until something happens in your neighborhood or community before you give us a call. Make it a part of the everyday curriculum. The Department of Education requires that school systems have these conversations. So why not give us a call now? Build us in. We can be in your health curriculum. We can be in your English curriculum. We've done it all. The intent here is to provide that information, training, and tools. And so we'll go in, we'll spend 3-4 days, whatever it takes in a school to ensure that every student gets a chance to get this information. And we can also do continual follow-up training and information. Our goal being that if something happens, they know what to do. But better yet, that every person that we talk to becomes an advocate. Now, they may not be an advocate like how we are, right? They may not do this every single day and walk into a building to do it. But they'll be able to hear a conversation or see a movie or get a curious question and know how to possibly navigate that conversation. And then they'll say, you know what? I remember this organization named Turnaround that talked about this in my school. And you know what? They have an entire virtual learning center, and it's free. Maybe we can log in and get some information or send an email to their education team and get some answers. Let's do it. So we've seen that happen. And when it happens with high schoolers, it's like our special fun moment. It's like, oh my gosh, high schoolers just tweeted about us or sent us a message on Instagram. Yeah, it's really amazing. Our goal ultimately is to put ourselves so far out of a job and that all we are doing is talking about prevention so that it never shows up again, right? But we're a long way off from that, where our intention is around culture change. So if you've got that individual one-on-one education, prevention, and work that we're going to do. And so when you look 4 or 5 years down the line, what does societal and systematic change look like? What does it look like for our laws to be creating spaces and the legal support to support survivors? What does it look like for our school systems to have it embedded that the culture that's happening here is that everyone is safe, everyone is respected, and everyone has access to the level of care that they would need if something does in fact happen? So what are those long-term trajectories? How do we create communities, communities and cultures and hubs for these conversations that shift the culture and create opportunities for so much of what we're talking about that's in industry to spread beyond the industry and is part of the larger global conversation that we're all having together? I think that's where I want to see us going and be involved in. And I think one of the amazing things is that Baltimore has a very unique opportunity to have this, what's the word I'm looking for? To have a trend-setting moment for other similar cities across the nation. Baltimore is literally positioned for opportunities like this. And if we work together on a state and local level, then we are certainly going to create opportunities where not only we're creating models that are able to be duplicated in other cities and other communities, rural as well as communities just like ours. So I'm really excited. And if this is something you're interested in, we want them all to give us a call. We're happy to have those levels of conversation. So when we talk about challenges, unfortunately, there are the challenges that have existed for decades and decades in our field. The idea that this doesn't happen in certain communities, when unfortunately the reality is it is. I've literally had schools say to me, "Oh, we don't have that problem, so we don't need you to come in." Okay. How do we navigate behind that? Challenges where, unfortunately, the types of violence that get highlighted and get the funding aren't the types of violence that typically affect people in particular communities that are gendered or siloed. So violence that affects women, violence that affects the LGBTQ community, violence that affects trans folk, violence that affects immigrant populations and communities. We need all of these conversations to be amplified. So that's one of the barriers that we're up against. And I'll tell you one of the most interesting things that I know people who are listening to this conversation have the ability to make an impact in. So I wanted to lean in on this. The idea and the concept that funding has to be in one direction is limiting our ability to truly make the type of impact we do. We need to have funding that's completely unrestricted. So individual donors are powerful. Corporations and businesses are immensely powerful here because they have the ability to provide funding that give us the flexibility to meet the needs. That is one of the challenges that we continually face. And so when we get a chance to meet the need of a survivor who's got to fly across country so they can return home to family, and we need to be able to have the flexibility to increase our staff capacity to be able to meet those types of needs. I can give you examples all day long, but when we talk about funding, when you talk about access to care, when you talk about the visibility of this as we've been saying this long before coronavirus and COVID became a thing, but that's truly a pandemic. Those are the things that we want to see. And the increase in those levels of attention and in focused work is what's going to make a difference for us to kind of jump the hurdles and remove the barriers and increase the floodgates to people who unfortunately need this work until we don't have to do it anymore.
I'm working in a job that I love.
Because I was given a chance.
To show that my disability
is only one part of who I am.
Who I am.
Who I am.
At work, it's what people can do that matters.
For more information, visit whatcanyoudo.
So one of the things that we know for sure and what we aim to be as an agency is a wraparound service. Case in point, right? We have a limited right now ability, unlimited funds though. We'll change this entirely. So one of the things that tends to happen with any survivor of trauma, not just domestic violence or human trafficking, includes someone who's experienced sexual assault or child witness, right? Is the ability to concentrate on their healing, but still be able to pay their bills, right? And so what happens when a person either loses their health care or loses their job? What service allows them to continue doing that work? If we had unlimited funds, we could create a system that would allow that survivor to focus on their healing and get their bills paid. And then tier 2 looks like accessing what's next for you. Do you need to stay in this mode of employment, or is there maybe entrepreneurship that would be a better opportunity for you? And how do we build your skill set in that space so that you can scale in that way? How do we create the space where, is it childcare? You got a job, but it's at night. You know how many daycare centers run at night? Not any. Okay, maybe like 1 or 2 in remote places. But what would it mean if we could have a 24/7 ability to allow those children to be in a safe space with individuals who can care for them while their parent is working a night job so that they can sustain their way of life and forever, however long it takes for them to make that shift? If money was no object, it is literally wrapping around the survivor all of the services that are needed for them to truly make the shift to thriving, to being sustainable by their own standards. Where I want to live may not be where they want to live. Where I want to work may not be where they want to work. They get to choose though. And it's about being able to support them throughout that process. It's the ability to do things like pay for those that aren't doing direct service, but make everything function. Can I give you an example? We had an opportunity where a survivor was calling, right? And we had to make sure that we had the staff member who was fully trained, able to answer the phone. What happens when that phone doesn't get answered at 10 o'clock at night? We're lucky because we have a 24-hour helpline that was staffed by volunteers and is now staffed by team members who can answer the phone at night. It makes a huge difference to pay the receptionists, as people like to call them, exceedingly well to be able to handle trauma. I don't think a lot of people think about that. If funding was unlimited, we would have a social worker licensed answering that phone, because they know what to say when the person on the other end says, please help me. Oh my God, I think they're trying to kill me. Now, of course, we train our team to be able to say that. But the level of skill needed to do that is remarkable. And what happens when you hire somebody who's 21 years old, you train them to do that, you get them licensed, you help them go through school, and they're still able to pick up that phone fully trained at the level of a therapist to be able to answer that call. Answering the phone isn't just, oh, anybody can do it. No, it is being able to show up for that person in the moment of crisis and being able to show up and answer the call. And I don't think that we put enough care, enough attention, and enough power in the hands of people who do that administrative type of work. Because if that phone doesn't get answered, that client doesn't get the service. And there's so much power there. If money was unlimited, that's what we'd be doing. Really wrapping around the service, from everything from the administrator that answers the phone to the person who drops off food at the shelter. So that's Mothyna's version anyway. Other people might have other ideas. I've seen a lot. So for example, when I first started at Turnaround, my sole job was to get into a school or get into the police department to do a training, right? To spend maybe an hour with someone and hope it made a difference. Now I get to amplify that level of engagement when we talk about wraparound services. Not only do I get to spend an hour, maybe I get to spend 5 or 6 weeks with you. Maybe I get to make sure my staff is so powerfully trained that they understand how to make an impact in a short period of time, not an hour, but 4 weeks. That they get a chance to build out new projects or services that shift how we show up as bystanders in a space. That we get a chance to create opportunities to shift how the campus creates the policy, so that when those student leaders leave, the impact that we've made doesn't leave, because it carries on in the systems at that campus level. I've gotten a chance to see us, only provide counseling or only provide education, only have a hotline, to know what does it look like to provide legal services to the client? What does it look like to say, why do we always make people come to us? How can we get to them sooner, quicker, faster? How do we create a partner in this school system, with this library, with this Boys and Girls Club, where we get to be stationary there? And once they open the door, they don't have to go anywhere else. We reduce the barriers. I think that's one of the most exciting things that I've seen in my 16 years. Reducing the barriers to access our type of care and the type of care they may need. And that also means if we're not the place for them, or they've gotten everything they can from us, who's their next partner? So creating those relationships, those are the types of things that keep me coming back. It's when I go to a campus 4 years later. Let me give you this example. I went to Morgan State University, not only as a student, but I kept going back to the campus. And one year I went in and I did my customary 1-hour speech, and I said, if you want to volunteer, let me know. We're here. We would love to help you build your skill and as well as be benefited by you. 4 years later, I made the same speech. And someone came up to me and said, actually, I would love to volunteer. I remember when you spoke at my freshman orientation class. Okay, age. So I said, yes, absolutely. And they followed up, and I said, do you need class credit for this? They said, no, actually, I just really want to learn more. That person did a whole year-long internship with the agency. And at the point that they were getting ready to graduate, I had the opportunity to say, by the way, what are you doing after graduation? I don't know. I'm looking for jobs. Really? Because I can hire you. Would you like me to hire you? I would love to hire you. And was able to hire that person. And they were stayed with the agency for over 5 years. I get to say that once they moved on for another 4 or 5 years and learned some amazing skills, built some relationships in the community, that when we had the opportunity to say, hey, would you be interested in coming back? Would you be interested in stepping into a management level? Here are all the things that we've added into our programming and the work that we do here that you would be able to put some work in on the ground level with developing. And they said yes. So that's the type of relationship building that we value at the agency. that I value that I've gotten a chance to do over the last 16 years. I think that's where I constantly show up. I'm always saying to our leadership team, how can we innovate this more? How can we, and they indulge me, and they are amazing leaders themselves, and they go, you know what, that's a good point. How can we do this more? As a matter of fact, let's do this. And then I have to go, okay, I didn't expect that I would be doing that, but let's do it. And we get a chance to support each other in creating remarkable change. So that's the biggest thing for me, I think, in those last 16 years, is being at that level of seeing the transformation and the result it produces from literally the physical space that we're in to the result it produces for the clients that walk in and out of our doors.
My name is Michaela. When I came back from Iraq, I became pregnant and ended up homeless. Counselors helped us apply for VA supportive housing. I got help from VA, and now I'm on a mission to share these resources. Call 877-424-3838.
Hi, my name is Carrie Fields, and I'm a community educator on Turnaround's Community Engagement and Training Team, where we offer completely free education sessions and workshops to schools across Baltimore City and Baltimore County. If you're interested in inviting us to your school or your organization, you can learn more at www.turnaroundinc.org.
Hi, and welcome to week 5 of Turnaround 7 Weeks of Giving. I am Amanda Rodriguez, and we are here at the gorgeous village of Cross Keys, who is one of our sponsors for this week. We are so excited to have you joining us for our first of 2 events on Shelter Week. Shelter Week is so important because so much of what we do is focused on that crisis response. Last week was Helpline Week, this week is Shelter Week, where we can really talk about one of the most important parts of serving survivors of domestic violence, which is ensuring that they have safe and reliable shelter. The place where they can lay their head down at night, that first moment after getting out of an abusive situation, and they don't have to worry about what's coming next. And so we are really privileged and very honored to be able to provide that service to our community. And so I am very excited to be here on this week, again here at the Village of Cross Keys, who is a sponsor for this week. We also wanted to thank Merit Companies for their sponsorship of the entire 7 weeks of giving. We also, of course, want to continue to thank all of the sponsors who have been involved. This week is especially important for us because we are kicking off another wonderful fundraising opportunity for those that are engaged in the real estate business. And Jean Henningsen, our Director of Strategic Initiatives, is going to talk more about that. But all of the prizes for that event are compliments of Freedmont Mortgage Company, who is another sponsor for this week's events. So I'm going to turn it over now to one of our wonderful crisis response coordinators, Laprice Cook, who's going to tell us more about why this week is so important to her and the work that we do at Turnaround. Laprice?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laprice Cook, and I am a crisis response coordinator with Turnaround. One of the services that we provide, we want to highlight today, which is our emergency shelter program. We provide emergency shelter services to survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, human trafficking. The emergency shelter is offered to survivors that are screened for lethality and high danger. Lethality and high danger means that the survivor is facing probable death or serious injuries or harm at the hands of their abusers. The emergency shelter services offer survivors an immediate and safe option where there is no alternative to keep them safe from further harm or abuse. We offer these safe options through our partnerships, including Hotel Partners, the Family Crisis Center, and the Center for Hope, and other victim service providers and programs in our community. We are thankful to have these partnerships because we all have a common goal, which is to keep our survivors safe. Emergency shelter is not only support survivors, but also their children. They are seeing this abuse firsthand on a daily basis. To give you an idea of how vital emergency shelter services are, from 1 year ago to now, Turnaround has provided emergency shelter services to 200 survivors and to 80 children. We have provided over 1,000 safe bed nights during that time to these survivors at no cost to them. Receiving shelter services also includes the provision of food, clothing, toiletries, new cell phones, supplies for the children, and transportation as well. You cannot imagine what a survivor is going through when they are at a serious risk, but we see it every day here at Turnaround. Until the day that survivors can be free from harm, violence, abuse, we will make sure that the emergency shelter is an option for them. We are asking you to connect with us to make sure that each survivor can be safe. Everyone can do one thing. Tell one person, make one phone call, one social media post, letting your friends know about the Turnaround and how we support survivors in our emergency shelter services. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important for the community to know what Turnaround does and the needs of survivors who are living in our community and their children, and how we show up for them every single day. So I'm Jean Henningsen. Amanda mentioned earlier, I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I wanted to tell everybody here today and anybody who might be watching that we have a special fundraising competition that we're launching called Safe at Home that is geared specifically to our realtor friends. So if you are a realtor or you know anybody who might be interested, from now through the end of this calendar year through December, we're running a competition where you donate up to $200 from each closing to Turnaround, and whoever raises the most will win some really, really cool prizes. So we have Skybox at an Orioles game next season, in the next spring, for you and several of your friends. Parking will be provided, food will be provided, and then second prize is 2 seats near home plate in the game next season. So we're really excited to be able to offer that. So realtors, we know you're competitive. Go, help us raise money to support shelter for the survivors that we see. We're seeing more and more need every day, every month, and we can use every dollar that you raise. So if there's anybody here who would like to sign up officially for the Realtor competition, you can do so right now. All right, we do have our first sign up. So if you want to just name your contact information, and you will be entered to win some really awesome prizes. Thank you so much. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, great. Okay, we've got our first 2 realtors signed up, ready to compete. Donate $200 from each closing from now through December, and possibly win some really, really cool prizes. I know there's a lot of Oriole fans out there, so sign up. We'll be posting information on our website for those who couldn't come here today, and on social media, so you can sign up online. And we wanted to thank everybody for coming today and for supporting Turnaround online and right here at Cross Keys. And thank you to our sponsors again.
Hi, my name is Amanda Rodriguez, and I am the Executive Director of Turnaround. Welcome to the 5th week of our 7 weeks of giving. I am thrilled to have all of you joining us today that are here live, and then all of you that are on our Facebook Live. Today is especially important to me this week. It is our shelter week. So last week we were talking about Helpline, which is a critical function of our crisis response. But the next step in that process is ensuring that all survivors have access to a safe place to lay their heads so that they can start to plan and are empowered to make decisions that are best for their future. And at Turnaround, our crisis response model includes a shelter response that, in my opinion, is like no other. I'm so proud of the team that does this work, and I can say that when I started at Turnaround, actually when I was in between the one job and the next job, I called a survivor who I'd worked with when I was a prosecutor, and I remember the words that she said to me. She said that when she was recovered from a trafficking situation, she said the only options I had were to go home, where I was being abused, or to go into a homeless shelter. She said, that is unacceptable, do better. And so I think at Turnaround, we have done that, and that's because of the amazing work of our staff and the amazing dedication of our survivors to continue to see themselves walking forward on this path towards a journey of healing. So I'm really proud to have all of you here tonight, and I really appreciate all of the community that has shown up. to continue to support our mission here at Turnaround. I want to thank our sponsors. So Merit Companies is the 7-week sponsor. They sponsor every single week. I want to thank Freedmont Mortgage. You're going to hear more about an incredible competition that we are running starting this week, launching this week, where all of our realtor friends, we're going to call you out so that you can start supporting our Shelter Week. There's no greater connection than those that are selling homes with those that are also looking for a shelter for themselves. And I also want to thank the Village of Cross Keys, where we had our 3 o'clock event today, who also sponsored this week. So it is a really important week to me, and I really appreciate, again, that continued support for the mission of Turnaround. I am now going to turn to our first speaker this evening, Senator Chris West. I actually remember the first time I met Senator West. I went into his office to talk about a bill that I was working on, and I remember talking about human trafficking to you, Senator West, and I remember the words that you said. It was something along the lines of, I can't believe that that actually happens, especially in Baltimore County. And Senator West heard me out and was the only Republican that signed on to the bill as a co-sponsor, which I greatly appreciated. So I appreciate your leadership on that, and I am so thrilled to have you here tonight. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. It's great to be here. I guess I can take this off up here. I'm not sure he's on the program, but we have with us the Baltimore County State's Attorney, Scott Schellenberger, who Amanda used to work for, and who I work very closely with down in Annapolis on bills relating to policing especially. Scott is a terrific partner. I will add, I'm a Republican, Scott's a Democrat, it makes no difference. We work together very well. And I'll say the same thing, and Michelle Guyton is going to come up in a minute. She's a Democrat. She's in my district. Michelle and I work together really well. So in Baltimore County, we have a tradition of working across the aisle in a bipartisan way. So it's great to be here tonight. I met Amanda a couple of years ago when we talked about the traffic, but I really got to know her a couple of months ago when I took a tour of the facility down on LaSalle Drive and learned much more about the organization. So for those of you who aren't totally familiar with it, let me just give you a little bit of information. Turnaround was founded in 1978. Amanda is the executive director. Tom Strong of the Venable Law Firm is the president of the board. It works on intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and sex trafficking. 40% of their cases are intimate partner violence, 30% are sexual violence, and the final 10% are trafficking cases. It works with all the survivors of these situations through compassion, counseling, and education, and in particular therapeutic services. The facility on LaSalle Drive, most of the offices are offices where the door can be closed and therapeutic services can be provided to the survivors. Of a special interest to me as a lawyer, free legal consultation is available through this organization, and they do a lot of free legal consultation each year. So in terms of how much work they do each year, in 2019 they had over 1,500 hotline calls and nearly 600 trauma therapist engagements. Last year, it went up to 2,000 hotline calls and nearly 800 trauma therapist engagements, and they render comprehensive services to about 3,000 people each year. So it's a really important organization. Of paramount importance today, the emergency shelter for those leaving dangerous situations is very important, both for victims and their children. My wife was the head of the board some years ago of an organization in Baltimore City called Baltimore Outreach Services that operates out of the basement of Christ Lutheran Church down in the Inner Harbor, which provides shelter for women and children getting out of abusive situations. And this isn't just overnight shelter, this tends to be long-term shelter. So I know an awful lot about the need for these sorts of services to people, both in Baltimore City and in Baltimore County. And let me just conclude by saying, you may remember the old commercials on television, the Norelco commercials. They had this guy saying, I saw the product and I liked the product so much, I bought the company. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Those commercials? Well, when I took the tour of Turnaround's facility on LaSalle Drive a couple of weeks ago, I liked it so much I'm not going to buy the company, but I decided to make a personal contribution. So Amanda, if you'd come forward, I've got my own check for $500 that I want to give to Turnaround. Sure. And that's it.
I am now absolutely honored to introduce Delegate Michelle Guyton. Delegate Guyton and I are just meeting tonight, but interestingly, and I think our Deputy Director Rachel Sy will also recognize this connection. Oh, I always forget to take the mask off. Delegate Guyton worked on a project and she and I crossed paths and didn't even know it, which I think is hilarious. So there was a project that I worked on while I was at the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention that looked at empowering our schools to identify child victims of trafficking and connected all the pieces to make sure that those children were advocated for. And I left and wanted to see that continue on, and we actually heard about that through the Regional Navigator Program that both Rachel and I are working on here in Baltimore County. And we've been working with Dr. Michael Ford here in Baltimore County, who also worked on that project. And so he was so excited to get it started again. And I am just thrilled that you are so passionate about that project. I think the connection that you made there is so special to me because it shows such a particular understanding of issues around survivorhood and also the importance of advocating for survivors in all age groups and all demographics. So I really appreciate your passion for this issue, and I am very honored to have you here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with all of you. I've had a chance to meet most of you in this room, and so I recognize that you're not really just here for information to learn about Turnaround, and I want to speak to you more as colleagues, because that is what you are with me, and just so that I may not be as highly elevated in this field as you are right now. But I wasn't sure what to talk about here, because as Amanda just said, and as I'm going to tell you, I had experience in every one of the things that the issues that touch the lives of your clients, right? And I want to start by saying that I know words are very powerful and people bristle at certain words, but I am going to use the word victim when I talk to you. I'm going to tell you that I know that you don't want me to do that, right? And that survivor is the more appropriate way to deal with trauma and to talk to people in a therapeutic way. So whenever I talk to someone who is an actual survivor of any sort of abuse, that is how I would refer to them, to give them agency, to take the onus off of the abuser and onto the person. So I recognize that. But the reason that I want to use those two terms is they're not interchangeable to me, right? I have worked going way back, right? I've worked on suicide crisis lines, starting back in you're gonna know how old I am, 1989, right? I worked in domestic violence shelters in Iowa and developed policy for the women and children there so that they could move, and this is the point, from being victims to being survivors. It doesn't always happen overnight, and to be honest, you and I both know it doesn't always happen. Not everyone who experiences abuse survives, right? What you do, what we all do as advocates and activists, and what we can do as policymakers, that's what closes that gap and helps them evolve from victimization to true survivorship, right? And I want to be a part of that. If you need that help, this is where my heart lies. So I want to tell you that one way that I did that this year, a very small way, is that we had a situation, a constituent called me up and said that her daughter, who was 15 years old at the time, had been sexually molested at her first workplace, summer job, right? And that she did what we tell our kids always to do, right? What do you tell them to do? Go to the police, right? She did that. She did that by herself at 15 years old and walked into a police precinct to report what had happened to her. To find out that she had to do that yelling through a plexiglass barrier in a public space, describing her assault, right? So I did some research on that and found out that that is, in fact, the way that we do things. No, was, in fact, the way that we did things in Maryland, right? And put in the bill, along with my cross-file in the Senate, Senator Shelley Heddleman, who most of you probably know from her amazing work in this area, in all of these different areas. It's so simple. All it said is that you have to offer somebody who's reporting something of a sensitive nature, a personal nature, a private room to do so, right? That was not a requirement until I believe it went into effect October 1st, right? Such a simple thing that can help somebody move from feeling like they're a victim and being re-victimized, right, in that situation, to having true ownership of their survivorship, right? Going down the path of having dignity, having privacy, and not being re-traumatized. So that's just a simple example. I do want to talk a little bit about sexual assault because that's something that I have done a lot of work on. Talk about me being old, and now you're really going to get it. Most of you are younger than I am, and you may not realize that we didn't always have cell phones, right? So both my husband and I, back in the early 90s, had these little black boxes on our bedside tables that would beep at you, always in the dead of night. Like the pagers, I think, were always, emergencies always happened in the middle of the night, right? When they beeped at us, one of us was going to the ER. He was going because he was a surgical resident and somebody was in a car accident or, a gunshot wound. And I was going to meet, and I'm going to use the term victim, the victim of a sexual assault. Working through, this was in Iowa City, Iowa, has a terrific sexual assault program there, even then, but especially now. And I was going to teach him or her that they shouldn't put their clothes in a plastic bag, right? They need to put them in a paper bag. I was going to tell them that no matter how disgusting and dirty they felt, they could not take a shower, right? And I was going to explain the process of collecting evidence and hold their hands while they went through it, if that's what they wanted, right? All of those things are important services. So the next part of the bill that I just told you we passed this year is going to be to require those sort of services to every person who reports a sexual assault in the state of Maryland. So that ties it all together. But I also want to say one last thing about that work, and I would love to talk about all of these things. But and that is the hardest part of my job then was the fact that I was on call because I was a child psychologist for all the child sexual abuse cases. Because they thought I could handle it. My mom's sitting back there and she knows I can't handle it, right? Nobody should be able to handle it, ever, right? So I held it together most of the time until I got in my car, right? You've all probably been there, right? And sometimes I didn't, right? But I did understand the importance of that support and the trauma that is associated with those kinds of experiences, not just having them, but the way that they're approached after they happen. And that's why the work that you do is so, so, so important. So if there's one thing I can say to you is I know how hard it is. I'm gonna cry just talking about 25 years ago. But it's so important, so thank you for doing it. I think I'll stop there. I want you to know that I am here if you need me. I didn't bring you a check today, but I certainly want to be involved in your work.
I am very happy to now introduce Sherelle Peterson. Sherelle is our manager for crisis response services at Turnaround, and when I started at Turnaround, Sherelle was our legal advocate. And we all saw so much in Sherelle. She is not just a dedicated staff person, she's dedicated to our community in a way that it not just surprises you, but it inspires you as a leader in this agency. She is a leader at our agency. Sherelle took over just as COVID hit, and her position went from running a physical shelter to running a hotel-based shelter to losing the physical shelter and then running a completely remote helpline staff. And she did so with grace and poise and professionalism in a way that I think few of us could ever expect or even call on ourselves to do. It was an incredibly difficult position to be in, and Sherelle did so with losing very few staff members. In fact, I think her staff may be the longest standing. She really has been able to manage that staff in an incredible way. She has continued not just to, and this is a story that I'll tell just pieces of it. When we started doing the hoteling services as the way that we could transition to ensure that survivors had shelter services during COVID. We only had one hotel that was available to us. That was how Turnaround had always provided these services. And Sherelle instantly kind of realized this was not going to work, because there were times that the hotel was either not available or when that hotel was not the right place for that survivor. So Sherelle took it upon herself to find not one, not two, but I think 5 hotels, including hotels out of county, to make sure that survivors always had the right place to go, so that there was never a question about where they would lay their head, that their children would always have a safe place. We have served more survivors, not just 1 or 2 more, thousands more survivors during COVID than we have ever served before, and that is under Sherelle's leadership. So Sherelle, you are amazing. We are thankful to have you, and I am very honored to introduce you.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everyone. As Amanda said, my name is Sherelle Peterson, and I'm the Crisis Response Program Manager for Turnaround, and I supervise the Crisis Response team. One of the services we provide that we'd like to highlight today is our emergency shelter program. We provide emergency shelter services to survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. Emergency shelter is offered to survivors that are screened for lethality and high danger. Lethality and high danger means that a survivor is facing probable death or serious harm or injury at the hands of their abuser. Emergency shelter services offer survivors an immediate and safe option when there is no alternative to keep them safe from further harm or abuse. We offer these safe options through our partnerships, including hotel partnerships, the Family Crisis Center, Center for Hope, and other victim service providers and programs in the community. We are thankful to have these partnerships because we all have a common goal, the safety of survivors. Emergency shelter not only supports survivors, but also their children that are seeing abuse firsthand every day. To give you an idea of how vital emergency shelter services are, over the past year, Turnaround has provided emergency shelter services to 200 survivors and 80 children. We have provided over 1,000 safe bed nights during this time at no cost to the survivor. Receiving shelter services also include the provisions of food, clothing, toiletries, new cell phones, supplies for children, and transportation. You cannot imagine what a survivor is going through when they are at serious risk, but we see this every day. Until the day that a survivor can be free from harm, violence, and abuse, we will make sure that emergency shelter is an option for them. We are asking you to connect with us to make sure that each survivor can be safe. Everyone can do just one thing. Tell one person, make one phone call, one social media post, letting your friends know about Turnaround and how to support survivors in our emergency shelter services. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Wonderful. I'm Jean Henningsen. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Turnaround. Thank you to everyone, to Senator West, to Delegate Guyton, and of course to our sponsors for coming out tonight, and to all the staff who are here. I wanted to let everyone know about a special competition, fundraising competition that we're starting for realtors. So if you or anybody you know, and anybody watching at home, is a realtor, you have a chance to win some really, really cool prizes donated by Freedmont Mortgage Group. It's called the Safe at Home with Turnaround competition. If you donate $200 to Turnaround from every home you close between now and register between now and the end of November, you can win. First prize is a skybox at Camden Yards for a 2022 Orioles game, with tickets for up to 18 people, parking passes, and food and beverage will be provided. Second prize is 4 great seats near your home plate during next Oriole season. So we know that there are some realtors who have supported Turnaround and others who would probably like to get in on this competition. Go to our website, turnaroundinc.org, or follow us on social media to learn more about how you can register and support our survivors finding safe shelter as well. And thank you everybody for coming.